The conservative says, stop being a victim. The progressive says, you're a victim because of the system. They sound like complete opposites. They're actually trapped in the same philosophical mistake. Over 200 years ago, Hegel explained why neither position can produce genuine freedom. Today, we're reacting to Amir Odom's appearance on Fox News, where he argues that Black Americans should reject victimhood because America is now on equal playing field. I think he's partly right, but if you stop there, you've misunderstood both freedom and Black history. And by the end of this video, I'll explain why the path to liberation is neither embracing victimhood or denying it. Now, first, I want you to hear Amir Odom in his own words. Listen carefully, because he's going to make one claim that I think is absolutely right and another that I think is fundamentally misunderstanding what freedom actually is.
I'm Black, obviously I'm Black, but I'm also gay, and growing up I was told I have 2 oppression points. Oh, I mean, you're Black in America, you're gay in America, you're gonna have it extra bad, and that does something to your mental when you don't believe in yourself, when you don't see the world as an equal playing field as your white counterparts, even though it is. It is a disgrace to think that in the America I'm in today is the same America my papa grew up in the 50s and 60s. No, I have every right afforded to me as any white person out there, but unfortunately, there's a large group of Black people who don't feel that way because of the mainstream media and the constant victimhood mentality that they're pressing them on. And I want them to grow from that. I want them to have that mindset that actually, I can be anything. I can do whatever I want to do, but that's hard when you constantly have other Black people and other forms of mainstream media constantly telling them that they can't, constantly telling them they're going to have other hurdles to go through. And in life, we all have things we're going to be fighting through. But at the end of the day, there's nothing preventing you from becoming the best version of yourself, and I hope that you know that and you go after that. And you don't have to fall into any ideological box that's placed upon you just because that you're Black.
Okay, honestly, some of what he's saying is right. Victimhood is a slave mindset. If you spend all your time blaming an external master or the system for everything wrong in your life, then you basically admitting that they still own you. And so this is going to stop you from growing because you've given all your power away to someone else. True freedom comes from doing, not asking. You don't get free by demanding it from somebody else. You get free by building things like businesses, families, or skills that prove that you are free. Hegel called this formative activity. When you look at something you built with your own hands, you see your own power reflected back at you. And this is why Booker T. Washington ultimately outgrew the master. Washington ain't wait for white society to give him his rights. He focused on self-reliance and self-help by mastering labor, building schools, helping people. He's an example of how the slave becomes for himself, whereas the master depends on the slave for everything. The master can't look around and see himself reflected in his institutions like the slave can, and that's why the slave is actually more free than the master. What I mean when I say the slave is more free than the master is quite simple if you really think about it. When we think about Black Americans and the ancestry that we carry, we think about the hands that built Washington, D.C., for example. We think about the railroads. We think about the cotton gin. We think about all of these different things that were birthed out of tragedy, yes, but made our freedom permanent because we were the ones actually doing the work. The master ain't do nothing. And that's why Washington was talking about how when slavery ended, the master was kind of helpless. And the slave actually looked down on the master. The slave actually felt sorry for the master because the master couldn't do anything. His freedom was symbolic. He basically was willing to stake his life for his freedom, but the slave also chose freedom too, but he chose freedom in a different way. Because he chose his values. He basically chose to live on and make his freedom permanent in the world through his actual labor, his actual work, versus just staking his life. So what I'm saying is that freedom is a choice of attitude. So the first step of freedom is realizing that while somebody might control your body, they don't have to control your values. It's an internal, eternal attitude where you decide who you are regardless of whatever is happening around you and outside of you. So yeah, you got to reject the victim narrative to win. To move from a slave mindset to actual success, you got to stop looking backward at the struggle and start looking forward at what you can build. That's what our ancestors did, and that's what we should be continuing to do today. So in that way, Odom is right. On the other hand, Odom is dead wrong. Why is it that Black Americans are always told to deny our brutal history and deny our victimhood in this country as if everybody ain't a victim to some extent, to some degree? I don't think that that's fair to Black Americans, and I think that we should reject that type of attitude altogether. And going back to Hegel, this is actually something that he problematizes through his reading of skepticism. What I mean is, if I'm a Stoic, right? Basically, my view is that I'm free in my attitude, I'm free in my mind, I'm free in my heart, even though my body is chained up. That's the condition of the Stoic slave, right? And so, knowing that free in my mind and my attitude, I start to develop a skeptic sense that I can choose my own values and basically just make up my own identity. And that's fine, but to do so requires a type of denial of your history, which I find to be problematic, and so did Hegel. For example, you say, lock my body, can't trap my mind, but your identity is your body just as much as it is your attitude. And so if your body is locked, but your mind is free, you're not fully free. You're still trapped. Furthermore, if you're saying that you're the one choosing your values, and one of the values you choose or perspectives that you take on the self is completely void of reality, if you choose to deny history, then you choose to deny yourself, because at least some of what you are is constituted by history. You are your past. The thread that connects everything together from past, present, and future is the sort of eternal form that you take that creates continuity over your life. And so you are your history, and your identity is constituted in your memory, aka your history. What you can recall about yourself and what others can recall about you is also what you are. You're not created as like a floating individual I with just these like scattered point plots of like, nows. You're like an actual continuous being. So the skeptic that denies history is kind of silly in that way, because he's not necessarily accounting for this sort of unity of the self. And so if I deny my history as a victim and its effects on me today, then to some extent I deny my history in general and like what I am. We all are victims, whether it's your childhood, whether it's your relationship life, whether it's, racial injustice, whether it's gender issues, whatever it is, we all are victims to some extent. So why is it that the Black American as an institution is constantly told to deny his past? We don't deny our past because our past as Black Americans in this country, foundational Black Americans, Negroes, whatever you want to say, our past from 1865 on forward is who we are to our core. It's why we eat the foods that we eat. It's why we make the music that we make. It's why we dress the way that we dress. It's why we've influenced so much. It's because of our past. So we deny our past. We are cut off from the fullness, the full unity of who we are. In other words, denying history breaks your identity. You're a combination of your past, present, and future. And to act like the brutal history of the 1950s doesn't matter today is to basically cut off a limb of your own identity. And you're fragmenting the self that wants to be whole. Black Americans, we want to be whole. And you also have to accept before you can move on. Think of it like being an adult, right? You can't move forward by pretending that you were never a child in any way. So simply rejecting the victim label is like running away from a fact. You have to stoically accept the bare facts of the tragedy first to truly integrate it into a strong identity. And that's what I don't hear in a lot of these conversations at a popular level. Because a free mind don't mean you have a free body. And so we can think about Frederick Douglass as an example of this. After he fought his master, he felt free in the mind, but legally he was still a slave for 4 years. So just believing in yourself ain't enough if the external world ain't changed to recognize that freedom that you have yet. So just focusing on mindset makes you a mere spectator. If your freedom is just a feeling in your head, you're just watching your life happen like a movie. But true liberation is going to require unhappy consciousness, which sounds bad, but it actually means taking your internal freedom and putting it to work in the real world through duty to help others. That's what Washington showed. That's what the Black Panther showed. That's what so many of our great ancestors showed. And like I said earlier, we are all victims to some extent. History happened and its effects are real. And so the goal can't be pretending you were never a victim, but it's figuring out where do we go now after we accept that fact. And so I agree with Odom with some nuance. It's not necessarily that we should reject our history as victims in this country. We clearly are, because we don't want to fragment who we are as an institution. Institution meaning people subject to certain social norms. We have the victim mentality in us because we're human beings, and all human beings have suffered to some extent. And we also have the Stoic consciousness and the skeptic consciousness. And so Black American identity is this move from the struggle to the death all the way to the unhappy consciousness. And what I mean by that is, like, our identity at its conception is birthed through struggle, through oppression, but it doesn't end there. And it doesn't end at the skeptic stage, which seems to be what Odom is saying. It's like we have to go beyond the skeptic stage too, because when we start to deny history or just act like everything is all peachy and just like make it about, what cultural differences we can make, it's like we lose the whole of who we are, and we make this sort of special pleading for Black Americans not to talk about what happened to them, for Black Americans not to feel the weight of our ancestors. No, we didn't struggle like our ancestors did. Today, our ancestors paved the way for us not to struggle as much, but we still do struggle. That's in us too. The struggle is in us. The victim is in us. The slave is in us. The master is in us. The skeptic is in us. The unhappy consciousness is where we all need to be headed toward. And yeah, like I said, I talk about this in length in my Fanon video. I'm more like in depth about exactly what I mean with some of these phrases and concepts that I'm using. But overall, I agree with what he's trying to say. I just don't like the framing that we should ignore our history as victims in this country. That ain't necessarily conservative, because the conservative is also constituted by its history and tradition. And so you actually can't have a conservative without an honest view of history and how it played out. So it's really that simple. Thank you for listening.